The sun was rising slowly over the wide Arizona desert, spreading soft orange light across the land. Cal Bennett guided his old truck down the dusty road, heading toward a small trading post that stood miles away from any town. Cal was a quiet rancher, a man who spoke little but felt deeply. He had lived most of his life caring for animals, land, and the people around him. For him, kindness was not something he needed to think about, it was simply the way he lived. That morning, he was planning to buy a few supplies for the ranch and look at some horses he had heard were being brought in. He expected a normal day, nothing special, nothing unusual. But life often surprises those who do not expect it. And Cal's day was about to change in a way he could never have imagined. When he reached the trading post, he parked his truck and stepped outside, brushing dust from his jeans. A few people wandered around the front of the building, chatting quietly. The air smelled like dry earth and coffee from the small stand near the entrance. Cal nodded politely to the usual faces: traders, travelers passing through, workers from nearby ranches. Then he noticed something different. A group of men stood near the back of the trading post, speaking in low voices. They were strangers to him, rough-looking, with unreadable expressions. They were clearly not there to buy tools or food. Cal's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in caution. He did not like trouble, and he hoped this group wasn't bringing any. Just as he was about to look away, the tallest man in the group tugged forward a young woman who looked tired and scared. Her wrists were tied loosely with a rope, and she stumbled as she walked. Cal felt a jolt in his chest, not fear, but concern. Something was very wrong. She was not being treated with the gentleness any human deserved. The tall man gave a strange laugh and said loudly, "Enjoy, cowboy. She bites." As if her fear was something amusing. His tone was careless, almost proud, as though he wanted people to believe she was difficult. But Cal didn't see anything difficult about her. He saw someone who looked exhausted, confused, and unsure of where she belonged. The young woman, who would later tell him her name was Nolan, kept her eyes on the ground. Even from a distance, Cal could see how tense she was. Her shoulders were tight, her breathing unsteady, and her movements careful, like someone trying to protect herself from everything around her. Cal felt a heavy sadness in his chest. He had seen many things in his life, but nothing pained him as much as watching someone treated without respect. He stepped closer, not with sudden movements, but slow and calm, like he approached nervous horses on his ranch. "What's going on here?" he asked quietly. The tall man shrugged. "She's being traded. She's not useful to us. Too stubborn. Too wild." The way he spoke made Cal's stomach twist. A person was not something to trade. A person was not something to label or judge. "Why is she tied?" Cal asked gently. "So she doesn't run," the man answered, with another careless laugh. "She's trouble. You can take her if you want. But I'm warning you. She'll give you a hard time." Cal looked at Nolan again. She wasn't trouble. She was afraid. Anyone could see that. Her eyes darted around, trying to understand what might happen next. When she noticed Cal looking at her, she quickly looked away, her face tightening like she expected an unkind reaction. Cal's heart softened. He had seen that same look before in animals who had been mistreated, animals who had learned to expect the worst. But Nolan wasn't an animal. She was a human being, someone who deserved care, respect, and gentleness. "How much are you asking for her release?" he asked quietly. The man seemed surprised by the question. "You want her?" "I want her free," Cal said plainly. There was a pause. The trader seemed unsure whether Cal meant what he said. But money spoke louder than questions for men like him. He named a small price, clearly more interested in getting rid of responsibility than anything else. Cal paid without argument. When the rope was handed over to him, he took it with careful hands. He didn't pull it. Instead, he stepped closer to Nolan and spoke in a soft voice. "It's okay. You're safe now. You don't have to be afraid of me." Nolan lifted her eyes slowly. There was confusion in them, uncertainty, but also a hint of hope, like she wasn't sure she could trust what she was hearing, but wanted to believe it. Cal gently loosened the rope until it fell free. He placed it aside and stepped back, giving her space. He didn't touch her or guide her. He simply stood near her, making it clear she had choices now. "You can come with me," he said quietly. "I have a ranch not far from here. You'll have a room, food, water, rest, and no one will harm you. You can stay until you decide what you want to do next." Nalin stared at him, her eyes wide. She didn't move for several long seconds. The idea of freedom felt too big, too new, too confusing. But Cal didn't rush her. He waited with the patience of a man who understood that healing took time. Finally, she gave a tiny nod. Cal opened the passenger side door of his truck for her, but didn't guide her in. She stepped forward on her own, slowly, watching him carefully as if waiting for a trick. When he didn't make any sudden moves, she climbed in and sat stiffly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Cal got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The truck rumbled softly, and the desert stretched out ahead of them. They drove in silence for a long time, the warm wind blowing through the open windows. Nalin kept her gaze on the road, her body still tense, but occasionally she glanced at Cal. Each time, she seemed to study him, searching for signs of unkindness, danger, or hidden intentions. But Cal's face remained calm, relaxed, and thoughtful. He didn't stare back at her. He didn't try to talk too much. He simply drove with quiet steadiness, letting her feel safe at her own pace. When they reached the ranch, Cal parked near the main house. The building was simple but warm-looking, with a porch, a rocking chair, and flower pots made by his late mother. The air smelled like hay and fresh soil. "This is home," Cal said softly. "You're welcome here." Nalin stepped out of the truck slowly, her eyes scanning everything: the barn, the fencing, the horses grazing in the distance. The ranch was open and peaceful. For someone who had felt trapped for so long, a wide space like this must have felt like another world. Cal gestured gently toward the door. "I'll show you your room. It's yours alone. No one will enter without your permission." Inside, the house was tidy and warm. Cal led her to a small bedroom with a simple bed, a clean blanket, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the pasture. Nalin stood in the doorway, unsure whether she was allowed to touch anything. "It's all for you," Cal said with a kind smile. "Rest as long as you like. I'll bring food to the table, and you can eat whenever you're comfortable." She looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she gave another small nod and stepped into the room. She sat on the edge of the bed, her posture still stiff, but her eyes softened just a little as she looked around. Cal stood in the hall for a moment, making sure she felt safe, then stepped away quietly. He moved to the kitchen and prepared a simple meal, placing it gently on the table where she could reach it without pressure. He didn't knock on her door. He didn't ask anything of her. He simply let her breathe, rest, and exist freely. As the evening sun painted the sky with shades of pink and gold, Cal stepped outside to check on his horses. While he worked, he kept thinking about Nalin, not with worry, but with a quiet promise in his heart. He didn't buy her to own her. He didn't buy her to control her. He bought her freedom because it was the right thing to do, and he hoped that, with time, she would come to see that she had found a safe place at last. The next morning, Cal woke before sunrise, as he always did. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, and still. The sky had just begun to shift from deep blue to pale gold. He stepped out onto the porch with a cup of warm coffee, breathing in the crisp morning air. For a moment, everything felt normal, yet he knew there was someone new inside the house, someone who had entered his life in a way he could never have expected. He wondered how Nalin had slept. He hoped she had found some comfort in the soft bed and safe room he had offered. But he also understood that comfort could not be forced. A mind that had been stressed for so long did not simply relax overnight. Trust took time, more time than most people realized. Cal finished his coffee, then walked to the barn to begin his chores. He always let people come to things on their own terms, and he wanted Nalin to feel no pressure. He checked the feed bins, brushed down the horses, and repaired a loose board on the goat pen. As he worked, his thoughts kept drifting back to the quiet room inside the house. He didn't hear the door open at first. He only realized Nalin had come outside when he turned and saw her standing a few yards away. She hadn't come close, she simply stood there, watching him carefully, her hands nervously clasped together. "Good morning," Cal said gently, giving her a calm smile. Nalin didn't answer. But she nodded, small, quick, and unsure. Her hair was brushed now, and she wore the clean clothes he had left near her door. The sight made Cal feel a small warmth in his chest. It meant she was trying, step by step, to settle into this new environment. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked, keeping his voice light. She paused, then nodded again. She didn't speak, but her nod carried a quiet honesty. "That's good," Cal said with a pleased smile. "There's breakfast on the table whenever you're ready." Nalin looked toward the house as if she wasn't sure she was really allowed to go back inside on her own. Cal noticed her hesitation. "You can come and go as you like," he said gently. "This is your home for as long as you want it to be." A soft expression crossed her face, something between relief and disbelief. She stayed outside a few more minutes, watching him work as if trying to understand him. Then she turned and walked back to the house slowly, as though she needed time to adjust to the idea that no one would stop her. When Cal returned later, the breakfast plate was nearly empty. It wasn't much, a few pieces of toast, scrambled eggs, and sliced fruit, but it meant a great deal to him that she had eaten. It showed she was beginning to feel safe enough to accept care. Nalin sat at the kitchen table, staring quietly at the fork in her hand. She looked up with a startled breath when Cal entered, but he stayed across the room, giving her plenty of space. "Food okay?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded, her eyes dropping again. She seemed nervous about even small conversations, as though every word carried weight. "I'm glad," he said. He didn't ask anything more. Instead, he moved to the sink and began washing his hands. He could feel her watching him, as though trying to figure out what kind of man he was. He kept his movements slow and calm. After a moment, he dried his hands and turned to her again. "If you'd like some fresh air, you're welcome to walk around the ranch. The land is open. No fences meant for you, only meant to keep the animals safe." Nalin blinked, surprised by the idea of such freedom. She glanced toward the window, as though she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. "You can walk anywhere you feel comfortable," he repeated. She stood, but very slowly, as if testing whether he meant the words. When she stepped toward the door, Cal didn't move. He didn't follow. He didn't guide her. And because of that, she paused only for a moment before walking out into the open yard. Cal watched through the window as she took her first careful steps around the ranch. She walked like someone who expected to be told to stop at any moment. But when no voice came, she walked a little farther. She paused near the fence, looking toward the horses grazing peacefully in the field. Their gentle movements seemed to calm her. Animals had a way of making space for people, without questions or judgments. Cal smiled to himself and got back to work. Throughout the next few days, a pattern began to form. Nalin continued to eat the meals Cal left for her, though she usually waited until he wasn't in the room. She slept quietly, though sometimes he saw faint signs that dreams disturbed her. She spoke rarely, but she listened with sharp attention anytime he said something. Cal made sure to never rush her. Sometimes he would talk to her from across the porch, telling her stories about the ranch, about the horse named Willow who hated mud, about the goat who once walked into his house and refused to leave, about the stubborn rooster who believed he owned the entire yard. Nalin never laughed, but her eyes softened, and sometimes the corners of her lips twitched in the tiniest hint of a smile. She was healing, little by little. The ranch hands soon noticed that Cal had brought someone new to the property. A few of them asked about her. Cal stayed calm and private. "She's under my care," he said simply. "She needs a safe place for a while." Most respected his privacy, but a few raised eyebrows, whispering questions he chose not to answer. People liked easy stories, but life wasn't always easy. Cal didn't feel the need to explain anything that wasn't their business. One afternoon, Sheriff Walker stopped by the ranch to check on Cal's recent supply deliveries. When he noticed Nalin standing in the distance, he gave Cal a questioning look. "Someone new?" the sheriff asked. "Yes," Cal replied in a steady voice. "She's staying with me. Everything all right?" the sheriff asked gently, trying to be respectful. "She's safe here," Cal said. "That's what matters right now." Sheriff Walker nodded, accepting the answer without pushing for more details. Cal appreciated that. He liked people who respected boundaries. One day, while Cal was repairing a fence, he looked up to see Nalin standing nearby. She wasn't close enough to touch, but she was closer than before. She held something in her hands, a small folded blanket he recognized from the room he had prepared for her. Cal wiped his hands on his jeans and gave her a gentle smile. "You can keep that," he said, misunderstanding her intention. Nalin shook her head. "I washed it," she whispered softly. It was the first full sentence she had spoken to him. Cal felt a warm wave of gratitude. She didn't owe him anything, not chores, not work, not repayment. But the fact that she had taken the time to wash the blanket and bring it to him meant she was slowly beginning to feel a part of the home. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "That's very kind of you." She glanced down, almost shyly. "It is your blanket. It's yours now," Cal replied with a gentle firmness. "Anything in that room is yours." She looked at the blanket in her hands for a long moment, processing his words. Then she gave a slow, small nod and held the blanket close to her chest. Something shifted that afternoon, not loudly or dramatically, but quietly, like a soft breeze moving through the trees. Nalin had spoken. She had offered something of her own choice. She had begun to trust. In the evenings, Cal sat on the porch reading old books or listening to the soft sounds of crickets. Nalin sometimes sat on the steps below the porch, a comfortable distance away. They didn't talk much during these moments, but silence between them was peaceful, not tense. Sometimes she watched the sunset. Sometimes she held a warm cup of tea he left on the porch for her. Sometimes she simply let the quiet settle around her like a blanket. Cal never pushed her to share her past. He understood that stories came out only when people felt ready. Healing wasn't a race. It was a path. And each step was meaningful. He made sure she knew she had choices. Each morning, he pointed out new parts of the ranch she could explore if she wanted. Sometimes she followed his suggestions. Other times she preferred staying close to the house. Both were fine. Cal also began teaching her simple things: how to identify safe plants, how to refill the water tanks, how to use the porch lights. He spoke slowly and kindly, and she listened with quiet attention. Every day, Nalin grew a little more comfortable. She walked a little farther. She spoke a little more. She smiled, very softly. When one of the ranch's kittens climbed onto her lap, she let her shoulders relax around Cal because she realized something important. He expected nothing from her. He wanted nothing from her. He simply cared. And as the days passed, the ranch didn't just protect Nalin, it began to help her rediscover herself. Cal's patience, the open land, the gentle animals, and the quiet safety of the house all worked together to create a space where she could breathe again, a space where trust could grow, a space where hope could return, a space where a frightened heart could slowly find peace. Days slowly turned into weeks, and the ranch began to feel like a calm world of its own: open skies, quiet mornings, warm sunsets, and soft evenings filled with the sound of animals settling down. For Nalin, this peaceful place felt almost unreal at times. It was so different from the fear and uncertainty she had lived through before she met Cal. She often reminded herself that she was safe, but part of her still found it hard to fully believe it. Little by little, she began to share small things about herself, not because anyone asked, but because she felt ready. Her voice was still gentle and unsure, but each word carried the weight of someone learning to trust again. One afternoon, Nalin sat at the wooden table in the kitchen while Cal prepared a simple meal. He didn't cook with fancy skills, but everything he made tasted warm and comforting. She watched as he cut vegetables with steady hands. Cal glanced at her and smiled. "You're quiet today." She lowered her eyes. "Thinking," she whispered. "About something good, I hope." Cal said, his voice soft. Nalan took a slow breath before answering. About before. Cal paused, not out of surprise but out of respect. He set the knife down gently so she would know she had his full attention. But he kept his tone calm so she wouldn't feel pressured. You can talk about anything you want, he said. Or nothing at all. It's your choice. She nodded, appreciating his patience. For a moment, she stared at her hands, folded neatly in her lap. Then, in a soft, almost distant voice, she began, I used to travel with my family. We lived far from towns. We moved with the seasons. My mother liked to sing while we worked. My father taught me about plants. What helps? What heals? My little brother loved to follow me everywhere. She paused, breathing slowly. I miss them. Cal felt a gentle ache in his chest. He didn't know what had separated Nalan from her family, but he knew she had carried this sadness quietly for a long time. They must miss you too, he said kindly. Nalan's eyes glistened for a moment, but she blinked back the tears. I hope they are well. She didn't speak of fear, danger, or pain. She only spoke of the people she loved and the memories that still lived inside her. Cal listened with quiet respect, never interrupting, never asking questions that might cause her discomfort. After a long silence, she whispered, I tried to stay strong. You still are, Cal said, stronger than you realize. Nalan looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief, as if she had never been told anything kind about herself before. For a moment, she straightened her shoulders in a small but meaningful way, as if Cal's words had reminded her that her spirit was still whole. Over time, Cal began teaching Nalan simple tasks around the ranch. He never forced her into anything, and he always watched her reactions carefully. If she seemed unsure, he stepped back and let her choose whether she wanted to continue. One of the first things he showed her was how to feed the horses. They approached the animals slowly, and the horses gently stretched their necks toward the buckets. This is Willow, Cal said, patting the horse's neck. She's gentle. She likes carrots more than anything. Nalan hesitated before reaching out. When her hand finally touched Willow's soft coat, the horse gave a calm snort and leaned into the touch. Nalan's eyes widened with quiet amazement. She likes you, Cal said. Nalan gave a small smile. She feels peaceful. That's because she is, he replied. Animals sense kindness. As the days went on, Nalan spent more and more time with the animals. She brushed the horses' manes, carried fresh water to the goats, and talked softly to the kittens who followed her everywhere. Animals did not scare her. Animals did not judge her. They simply accepted her. One evening, Cal found her sitting by the pasture fence, leaning back against the wooden rail, watching the horses graze. Her face looked calm, a rare sight in those early weeks. Nice view, isn't it? Cal said as he approached. Nalan nodded. It feels like the sky is bigger here. The sky has always been big, he said. Sometimes we just forget to look up. She thought about that for a long moment. It was strange how Cal could say something simple, and yet his words carried unexpected meaning. Slowly, she began to share more about her past, not all at once, and never in detail, but in small pieces that came out naturally during quiet moments. One evening while they sat on the porch, she said, I was moved from place to place. I never stayed long anywhere. Cal nodded gently, showing he was listening. I didn't know where I was going, she continued. I didn't know who to trust. I tried to be brave, but my heart was tired. Her voice trembled slightly at the end, not because she was reliving anything in detail, but because the memory of uncertainty was still heavy inside her. Cal didn't try to comfort her with words that would feel too big or too sharp. He didn't say, I'm sorry, or, it's over now. Instead, he said, you're here now. You're safe. And you're doing incredibly well. She let out a slow breath, as though letting go of a piece of fear she had carried for too long. Nalan looked up at the sky, her eyes following the first few stars that had begun to appear. Sometimes I wonder why you helped me, she said, quietly. Cal leaned back in his chair, his voice steady. Because everyone deserves kindness. Because no one should feel alone. Because helping you was simply the right thing to do. Nalan looked down at her hands again. I didn't know people like you existed, and I didn't know someone as strong as you existed, he replied. For the first time, she didn't look away. She held his gaze for several seconds, her eyes softening with a feeling she rarely allowed herself to feel. It was trust. Fragile but real. As weeks passed, word began spreading quietly in nearby towns that Cal Bennett had taken someone in a young woman others had once spoken about without understanding her story. Some people asked questions, curious or confused. But Cal always responded with the same calm truth. She deserves respect. That's all there is to it. Sometimes people didn't understand. Sometimes they judged. But Cal didn't change his stance. He protected her privacy with steady calmness. Nalan noticed this. One day she asked him, "People talk about me? People talk about everything they don't understand," he said, "but their words don't decide anything about your life." She thought about this deeply. It mattered to her that Cal stood up for her without saying too much or revealing her private story. He didn't treat her like something fragile. He treated her like someone whose dignity mattered. That made her trust him even more. One afternoon, while helping Cal stack hay near the barn, Nalan paused and stared at the open field. She looked thoughtful, almost distant. "Sometimes I feel like a bird that forgot how to fly," she said softly. Cal stopped stacking hay and leaned on the bale. "Birds don't forget how to fly," he said. "Sometimes they just need time to rest their wings." She looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen before, something tender, warm, and filled with quiet hope. "Maybe," she whispered. Cal smiled. "You're finding your way. And every day, you're stronger than the day before." Her eyes glistened again, but not with sadness, this time with gratitude. In the evenings, their quiet porch moments became part of their routine. Sometimes, Cal talked. Sometimes, Nalan talked. And sometimes, neither of them said a word. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful, like two people sharing the same calm space. Little by little, Nalan began to laugh softly at Cal's simple stories. She began to hum while cleaning or feeding animals. She began to breathe without flinching, speak without fear, and walk without hesitation. Her past was still part of her, but it no longer controlled her. Her present was filled with safety. Her future was beginning to take shape. And through it all, Cal remained steady, patient, gentle, and quietly protective, not as someone who expected anything from her, but as someone who genuinely cared. Part 3 ended with a quiet truth forming between them. Nalan was slowly returning to herself, and Cal was becoming a person she trusted more than she had trusted anyone in a very long time. The warm days of late summer slowly drifted toward fall, and the ranch settled into a calm rhythm. Every morning, Cal and Nalan worked in quiet harmony, feeding animals, tending the garden, cleaning the barn, and repairing small things around the property. The land had become more than a place to live. It had become a place where Nalan felt her heart growing lighter. She no longer walked with guarded steps. She no longer ate in silence while waiting for something bad to happen. She spoke gently, asked questions, and even smiled freely when the kittens chased her shoelaces. Cal noticed every small change, not with surprise, but with gratitude. Watching Nalan heal felt like watching a sunrise, slow, warm, and beautiful. But the world beyond the ranch was not always as peaceful. Rumors had begun to spread. People whispered in town, some curious, some confused, and a few carrying old ideas that didn't belong in a kinder world. Most simply wondered about the quiet young woman who now lived on the Bennett Ranch. But a few people, those who had been part of her past without caring about her as a person, started asking questions Cal didn't appreciate. Cal did not fear gossip. What concerned him were the intentions of certain men who did not understand compassion and who believed people could be controlled like objects. He knew some of them might one day come looking not because they cared about Nalan, but because they disliked losing control over anything, even something they had no right to. Cal kept these worries hidden. He didn't want to distress Nalan. She had suffered enough. She deserved peace. But peace, for the first time since she arrived, trembled on the edge of uncertainty. One quiet afternoon, While Nalin was picking herbs in the small garden behind the house, Cal was repairing a fence post near the main road. He had just hammered a new board into place when he noticed a trail of dust rising in the distance, a sign that riders or a vehicle was approaching. At first, he didn't think much of it. The road was open, and travelers sometimes passed through. But something about the way the figures moved made Cal pause. They didn't ride with the relaxed posture of ranchers or friendly visitors. Their pace was slow, watching the land around them, as if searching for something specific. Cal stepped back from the fence, resting his hand on the top rail while he waited. The riders drew closer, and as their faces came into view, Cal recognized two of them from the trading post the same day he had helped Nalin. They weren't men he trusted. They weren't men who treated others with kindness. Cal kept his posture calm, but inside he felt a steady alertness. The group stopped at the edge of his property. "Afternoon," Cal said. Not cold, but not friendly either. His voice carried the firm steadiness of someone who had nothing to hide and nothing to fear. One of the men nodded. "Afternoon," he replied, his eyes scanning the land behind Cal. "Heard you got yourself some new help around here." Cal answered simply, "You heard wrong." The man frowned slightly. "Funny thing is, folks in town say they've seen a girl around here. Dark hair, quiet. Looks a lot like someone we're familiar with." Cal's jaw tightened, but he didn't let it show. "This is private land," he said. "If you're lost, I can point you toward the nearest town. Otherwise, you should move along." The second rider tilted his head. "We're not lost. We're looking for someone. Someone who left without permission." Cal met his gaze steadily. "People are not possessions." The men exchanged a look, then the first one leaned forward slightly. "She has something of ours." "Clan." "No," Cal replied calmly. "You had something that was never yours to begin with." The silence that followed was heavy. The men's expressions tightened, as though they were unused to being challenged. But Cal did not step back. He stood tall, his presence steady like a wall built from stone and purpose. "We'd like to have a look around," the first man said. "The answer is no," Cal said. His tone didn't rise, but it carried an unbreakable strength. The man opened his mouth to argue. But Cal spoke again before he could. "You're not welcome on this land. You know it. I know it. So let's not make this longer than it needs to be." For a long moment, no one moved. Then the leader let out a sharp breath and gestured for the group to ride on. But as they left, their eyes carried a message, one that said they were not finished. Cal watched them disappear down the road. Only when the dust settled did he release the breath he had been holding. He returned to the house, trying to carry his usual calm. But Nalin noticed the tension the moment she saw him. She set down her basket of herbs and walked toward him. Her expression, full of quiet concern. "You look troubled," she said softly. Cal hesitated. He didn't want to frighten her, but he believed in honesty. "Some old acquaintances passed by," he said. "They won't come close. But I want you to know that if you ever feel uneasy, you can come to me immediately." Nalin's eyes lowered. "People from before?" "Yes," Cal answered gently. A faint tremor passed through her hands, but she steadied herself. "I'm not the same as before," she whispered. "I'm stronger now." Cal felt a surge of quiet pride. "Yes," he said. "You are." Days passed, and while nothing happened at first, Cal noticed small signs that the men had not forgotten. Sometimes he found tracks near the distant parts of his fence. Sometimes a neighbor mentioned strangers asking questions. No one ever came near the house, but their presence brushed the edges of the ranch like a cold breeze. Cal strengthened the fences, checked the gates, and made sure the ranch hands understood that visitors were not allowed without his permission. He kept the sheriff informed as well. Sheriff Walker took the matter seriously and promised to keep an eye out. Meanwhile, Cal made sure Nalin continued her routines without feeling alarmed. He encouraged her to feed the animals, tend the garden, and walk the property as she always did. He didn't want her world shrinking because of other people's choices. But Nalin sensed the shift. One evening, As they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the hills, she spoke gently. "Are you protecting me?" she asked. Cal looked at her, his eyes calm. "Yes," he said. "But not because you're weak. I'm protecting you because you deserve to feel safe." "Everyone does," Nolan nodded. "I don't want to bring trouble to your home." "You didn't bring trouble," Cal said firmly. "Trouble came on its own feet. You're not responsible for other people's actions." She looked at him with quiet gratitude. "You always say the right thing." "I just say what's true," he replied. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Just before sundown, the familiar sound of a sheriff's truck rolled up the drive. Sheriff Walker stepped out, tipping his hat as Cal approached. "Got news," the sheriff said. Two men were asking around town a little too boldly. The townsfolk started to worry. So I stepped in. They're being questioned now. They won't bother you for a while. Cal felt relief wash through him, not sharp or dramatic, but steady and warm. "Thank you, Sheriff," Cal said sincerely. "Just doing what's right," Walker replied. Then he added, "She's safe here. And she'll stay safe." Nolan had been watching from the porch. When Cal returned, she stood quietly beside him. "It's all right," he said gently. "Things are being handled. You don't have to worry." She took a long breath, then exhaled as if releasing a weight she had carried for too long. "I knew you would protect me," she said softly. Cal's voice was warm and steady. "I'll always do what's right. You're not alone anymore." Nolan looked out at the wide fields, the sky turning golden. The horses grazing, the land stretching peacefully in every direction. For the first time since she had arrived, she did not feel like someone who needed to hide. She felt like someone who belonged. The danger had passed not through fear, but through truth, community, and the steady courage of good people standing together. And in that moment, Nolan felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. The seasons began to change. The warm, bright days slowly shifted into cooler mornings, softer winds, and golden leaves that drifted across the ranch like pieces of sunlight falling from the trees. Life at the Bennett Ranch settled into a gentle rhythm again, this time without the shadow of strangers watching from the distance. The sheriff had made sure the trouble was gone, and the men who once caused fear were now far away, dealing with consequences that did not involve the ranch anymore. For the first time in a long time, Nolan felt the simple beauty of peace. She woke each morning to the smell of fresh bread, the soft nicker of horses, and the warm glow of sunlight through her window. She no longer woke with a startled breath. She no longer looked over her shoulder when she stepped outside. She walked freely on the land, breathing deeply, as if each day added new strength to her soul. Her footsteps were no longer hesitant. They were steady, confident, and full of purpose. Cal noticed everything, her quiet humming while tending the garden, her laughter when the goats tried to nibble her shoelaces, her calm presence as she brushed the horses or sat beneath the old cottonwood tree. It warmed his heart to see her discovering parts of herself she had once buried deep inside. And as Nolan healed, she began to think about her future not with fear, but with curiosity. One bright morning, as Cal repaired something near the barn, Nolan walked toward him carrying a small basket of garden vegetables. She stopped a few feet away and waited for him to finish hammering a nail before speaking. "Cal," she said softly, "may I ask you something?" Cal looked up, brushing dust off his hands. "Of course," he said with a gentle smile. "Ask me anything." Nolan hesitated. She looked down at her hands, then back at the open field. "I've been thinking," she began slowly. "I want to find my family, or at least learn if they are well." Cal's expression remained calm, but his eyes softened with understanding. He had known this moment would come someday. Healing often led people back to the roots of their life, the places that shaped them, the people they loved. "That's a good thing to want," Cal said warmly. "Your heart leading you home is nothing to fear." Nolan's voice was small. "But I don't know where to start." "We'll figure it out together," Cal said. "You're not alone in this." Her eyes glistened with quiet gratitude. She nodded, taking in his promise. For the next few weeks, Cal helped her contact tribal elders, communities, and safe networks that supported people finding their families. Letters were written, messages were carried, and slow but hopeful news began reaching the ranch. People recognized Nalan's name, her family's village, and the region where she belonged. Piece by piece, her past began aligning with her present. One cool morning, Cal walked out to the porch to find Nalan sitting on the steps holding a letter in her hand. Her eyes were full of emotion, full of memory, full of something bigger than either of them could place into simple words. "They are alive," she whispered. "My family, they are alive. They are alive." Cal sat beside her, letting the moment settle gently. "That's wonderful," he said softly. She nodded. "They want me to come home. They asked if I'm well. They said they have been hoping for news for a very long time." Her voice trembled not with fear, but with the overwhelming feeling of returning to something she had once believed lost forever. Cal let her speak, letting her heart open naturally. "I want to see them," she said. "But I'm also scared. So much time has passed." Cal placed his hands on his knees, leaning forward slightly. "Time doesn't erase love," he said gently. "Your family will simply be grateful to hold you again." Nalan took a slow breath and nodded. The days that followed were filled with quiet preparations. Nalan packed her things: a few clothes, the blanket she cherished, a handful of dried herbs from the garden, and a small map Cal had drawn for her to help with travel. She walked the ranch many times during those days, as if memorizing every part of it: the horses she had fed, the garden she had tended, the porch where she had shared peaceful sunsets with Cal, and the fields where she felt her spirit stretch freely for the first time in years. The animals seemed to sense the change. Willow, the horse who had first accepted her touch, nudged her shoulder gently whenever she passed. Even the kittens followed her more closely, as if refusing to accept that she would soon be gone. Cal tried to stay positive, but inside he felt a quiet ache. He knew Nalan belonged with her family. He knew she deserved the chance to reconnect with the people who loved her first. But he also knew he would miss her soft presence, her gentle voice, and the way her smile brightened even the calmest days. Still, he would never stand in the way of her happiness. On the morning of her departure, Cal hitched the wagon and prepared to take her to the nearest village where her family could be contacted. The sky was clear, the air cool and fresh. Nalan stepped outside with her small bundle of belongings. Her face carried both sadness and hope, a mixture that made her look even stronger than before. "Ready?" Cal asked softly. She nodded. Yes. They rode in quiet reflection. The fields rolled past them like golden waves, and the mountains stood quietly in the distance. As they traveled, Nalan spoke softly. "Cal," she said, "I never thought I would find safety again. I never thought I would smile again. But here, with you, I found myself." Cal kept his eyes on the path, his voice steady. "You did that on your own, Nalan. I only offered a place. You did the healing." She looked at him, her eyes warm. "I couldn't have done it alone." Cal didn't argue. He simply nodded. When they reached the village, a small group of people waited. Among them was a woman with long, dark hair streaked with gray, standing tall but trembling with emotion. Nalan gasped softly. "Mother," she whispered. Cal glanced at her with a gentle smile. "Go," he said. Nalan stepped out of the wagon slowly, almost disbelieving. But the moment she approached, her mother rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her with a love so strong it shook them both. Tears fell soft, relieved, joyful tears. There were no words needed, no explanations, only love, long delayed but never broken. Cal stepped back, watching quietly, his heart full of quiet peace. He watched as Nalan met her father, her brother, and the elders who had prayed for her safety. Their faces lit with gratitude, relief, and warmth. After some time, Nalan turned back toward Cal. She walked to him slowly, her eyes full of emotion. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You already have," Cal replied. "Seeing you safe and happy, that's enough." Nalan stepped closer. "I want you to know something," she said. "You changed my life. You showed me kindness when I had forgotten what kindness was. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go." Cal's voice warmed. "And you brought light to the ranch. You helped more than you think." She smiled, soft and heartfelt. "This isn't goodbye," she said. "I will return when the seasons change. Not because I have to, but because I choose to." Cal nodded. "The ranch will always welcome you. The porch, the animals, and me." Her smile deepened. They shared a long, peaceful moment, two souls connected by trust, respect, and the quiet strength of everything they had gone through together. Then Nalin turned back to her family, walking into a new chapter of her life with confidence she had rebuilt day by day at the Bennett Ranch. Cal watched her go, his heart steady and full. She was no longer the frightened girl he had met months earlier. She was strong, she was free. She was herself again. As he rode back to the ranch, the sky glowing with the colors of early sunset, he whispered to the open air, "Be happy, Nalin. And come back when your heart leads you." And she did months later, just as she promised. Stronger, brighter, and free, choosing the ranch not as a place of safety, but as a place of friendship, hope, and new beginnings.